All right, so thank you for joining us today for today's MicroAge Talks Technology webinar. My name is Maria Fiore. I'm the Director of Operations here at MicroAge, and I'm joined by Sergio Lima, Director of Customer Success, and our presenter today. So welcome, Sergio.
Hello, welcome everyone.
So today's conversation will focus on securing the data you have in the cloud. And just before we begin, we're going to go through some housekeeping notes. First of all attendees are muted to reduce any background noise, as I'm sure you've all noticed. We encourage you to ask any questions throughout the presentation by using the questions panel of the webinar tool. The webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive a link to the recording and the ebook that we're making available to everyone a little later today. We encourage you to download the ebook, of course, and re-listen to the recording or share the link with colleagues that might benefit from today's information. Also, for anybody who's looking for the presentation, if you look in the handout section of the webinar tool, you can download the presentation there. Lastly, at the end of the webinar, you will receive a short 3-question survey to gather your feedback. Please take a moment to share your feedback with us so we can improve future webinars. So before Sergio takes over, I'm going to take a moment to give you a brief overview of who we are for those who may not know us. So MicroAge is a Canadian technology service provider with 40 locations across Canada. We've been providing IT services and solutions to our clients for over 43 years. We strongly believe that to truly be a partner, we need to understand your organization. We need to understand your operations, your clients, your people, your goals, your challenges, your opportunities. Understanding your organization helps us recommend and provide the IT services and solutions that are right for you. That's a quick overview of who we are and how we engage with our clients. And with that, Sergio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maria. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Let's give you a little, this is our conversation for today. The importance of protecting your data in the cloud. So some of you, most of you, good percentage of you may already be in the cloud. Do you know whether or not you're protected? Is your data protected? Are you aware that there's certain responsibilities that you have versus the platform has? For example, in the second point, the shared responsibility model is taken straight out of the Microsoft playbook. We'll show you the differences of responsibilities, who does what, who's in charge of what, and the role it plays in your business, because whether you like it or not, moving to the cloud doesn't mean that you're protected instantly. It still means that you have to consider certain aspects of your business in the cloud, and you have to find a way to protect it, which leads to the third point, which is, what strategies can we put in place to protect that data? And then we'll answer questions along the way, as feel free to ask questions in the chat box section, and we could probably take them on the fly as well. So let's start with the importance of the data, right? A lot of us are moving stuff into the cloud, data, applications, virtual servers, platforms, you name it. It's all going into the cloud. But cyber, it's also a target for cyber criminals. Why? Because a lot of us assume that going into the cloud means that the level of security is now improved automatically by default, and that's not the case. So what happens with that is you end up going in the cloud and you start connecting it from different points now, not just from your office, but from people working from home, etc. So, it's very important to assume or take into consideration that a cloud solution or a cloud app or cloud system is technically still your network, your infrastructure, and you have to make sure that it's protected as much as possible against the typical, right? Viruses, phishing, malware, people trying to log in, etc. Obviously you may be part of an industry that's part of any kind of compliance requirements. You have to consider that as well. If you're in the industry where you need to save your data, store your data for X amount of years, 15 years, 7 years, whatever the case may be, you also need to make sure that that platform, that cloud vendor, has the ability to match the compliancy requirements that you're required to attain. Well, you have to make sure that whatever you're using in the cloud is at the same level or better than what you have. Otherwise, you can have a mismatch, and technically you fall out of compliancy with some of your vendors and partners and customers. The third aspect would be data sovereignty, which obviously should be one of the first questions you ask when moving to the cloud with any vendor, specifically with vendors outside of Microsoft, because we know Microsoft has several data centers and you can choose the data center that your storage, your data is stored in. So for example, if you're in Canada or you're in Eastern region, you can choose, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you can choose a Eastern region data center to have the data. You can replicate it over to the west side or central side and it remains in Canada. But you also have to ask that question to some of your third-party vendors, CRM applications, database applications that are non-Microsoft. You have to ask the question, where is that data being stored? Because chances are if it's stored in the US, well, you may be subject to some US guidelines, regulations, compliance, etc. And you know, they obviously they have the right to go in and take a look at that data if they want. And the fourth aspect is the business continuity portion. Now, again, going into the cloud, you're assuming that there's some kind of replication, there's some kind of resiliency. There is for the vendor. You have to consider it on your side, and you'll see in the next few slides what that means. But essentially, you have to figure out if you're running a SaaS application, are you okay with that vendor, that platform going down for X amount of hours or days? What happens when that goes down? Do you have a failover, a high availability? Do you have a copy of that data? Can you do you have a plan B for that data in case it's not available? So let's look at the shared responsibility model. So we'll look at the obviously this is the Microsoft shared responsibility model, but it's a model that a lot of SaaS vendors use, typically with the same types of responsibilities. So on the Microsoft side, these are things that you will not see from your end. So for example, you have M365 subscription with all your Office platform, OneDrive, Teams, etc., emails. You also have possibly some virtual servers in Azure. You're running your virtual servers, it's got your applications, your data stored. This slide does not talk about that. This side is the entire back-end infrastructure that we, you and I, or you and all MSPs do not see. So for example, Microsoft obviously has some sort of responsibility to ensure that their data centers are secure on the physical side. So they have multiple data centers, their actual buildings, are they separate floors within a building, who has access, is it specific people, is it everyone, certain IT people, are they doing surveillance, are they making sure that they have the right safeguards in place, just for them to be responsible enough to handle that data center in general. Then on the network security side, it's again their responsibility to ensure that no hacker and no outside criminal can get into their backend infrastructure and wreak havoc on all of their servers, physical, virtual, hypervisors, etc. So again, they're responsible for putting best-in-class security solutions in place, stuff that you won't see. I'm assuming Microsoft will put their own products in place, but again, it could be others. But these are solutions that you'll never know what they've been putting in the background. But it's their responsibility to ensure that that platform does not is not open to any vulnerabilities, is not open to any hackers. And then once that is in place, their physical servers obviously are running some kind of virtualization platform. In the case of Microsoft, they're running Hyper-V, they're running hypervisor servers. So all those servers are then teamed up together, high availability. Again, Microsoft's responsibility to ensure that that platform, that farm of servers, remains constant, functional, high availability, shifting over, load balancing, etc. And also making sure that the security patching and all the updates are done on the back end. These are all components that none of us see on the back end. And it is assumed, we know, this is, I guess this is the assumption that everybody thinks, oh, well, it's going to Microsoft. They have the physical security, they have the network security, they have the virtualization platform, they're patching all their servers. Yes, they are, but they're not patching your network. In your network are the virtual servers that you turn on and off and that run, that you can see and you can connect to. So that's your business, and it's also your responsibility. And this is where that shared responsibility model now shifts over to your side. You have to start looking at things with regards to data security. So the data that's stored in the cloud, right? That's your responsibility. You're storing it. Are you encrypting it? Is it encrypted at rest and in transit? Is something you have to look at to ensure that that's okay. Identity and access management. So again, you're responsible for your own users and the accesses that they have to your environment. So groups, users, permissions, access, who has access to what files, what folders, what servers, what applications. That is, I guess, the equivalent of what we call traditionally Active Directory. If you're going into the cloud with Microsoft, it's not considered Entra ID with Intune and some of the management features that come with Microsoft. But again, you're responsible for the users that connect to those environments. And of course, you have to wonder, if you're connecting to those environments, you just have to make sure it's the right people connecting to your environment, because now going to the cloud means the possibility of having users working from home. So you're not really sure if it's the same users that are connecting. Implement multi-factor authentication to make sure that it is, in fact, your users that are connecting and not anyone else. So you have to consider that portion as well in all SaaS applications. Again, I'm mentioning Microsoft, but these are things you have to consider for things like a third-party CRM vendor, Salesforce, if I can use an example. Same concept, right? If you have users that are using Salesforce or any kind of CRM, well, you have to make sure that they have some sort of multi-factor authentication so that it's the right user that's connecting, etc. You're also responsible for the network security on your side. And that means if you have traditional on-premise servers that you've moved over to the cloud, theoretically, you just opened a secondary site. So you created a second site for yourself. It's not your site, but it's a virtual site. So what that means is you can't just move stuff over into the cloud and assume that there's a protection on it at the perimeter level. And the network security side is also our responsibility, your responsibility, to ensure that once you're at the office connecting to something cloud, you need to ensure, specifically for Azure, virtual firewalls have to come in play. So it's identical to a physical firewall that you put in place at your office, where you're putting a virtual server in place so you can tie in that connection, secure site-to-site connection, and ensure that anybody from your office is connecting safely and in a secure fashion to your platform, to your cloud platform. And also that same virtual firewall can run as your VPN server for remote users. So you can VPN into your cloud infrastructure and do MFA and ensure that it's the right users that are connecting to your network. Now, if you're a software developer, you have some sort of application that you're publishing or using, Microsoft or any vendor, in fact, if it's your application, you're pretty much responsible for ensuring that your application is secure, the coding's okay, obviously you're following best practices, are you testing for vulnerabilities, are you applying patches, when are you applying these patches, all of that portion. If you're a developer with a specific application, obviously if you're running a virtual server with your application on top, the server portion has to be patched by you, and the application section has to be patched by you. And then, all of the tie-ins with the end user, the endpoint security. So moving to the cloud means chances are you have a lot of remote connectivity to that, right? The flexibility to go into the cloud is exactly that, the ability to connect from anywhere. But if you're connecting from anywhere, you may be connecting with any device. And that device that connects, you need to ensure that it's the right one, that it's protected with antivirus, that there's encryption on them, make sure that there's VPN, there's MFA, all of the basic features that you would put on an endpoint in your network, you still have to consider that if it's users working from home or working from another office or working remote, etc. So that still has to be taken into consideration. And again, your responsibility. So, Microsoft pretty much washes their hands. If you have a computer that has no protection, is connected, and then something happens to your network, that's on you. And with all of that, again, assuming that you're going to the cloud, a lot of people assume that the backups are being done, but in fact, they're not. You have to, in Microsoft's case, you have subscriptions that you can set up, and you can actually have backups done on the back end. So you can take care of that portion as well. So obviously you're turning on a bunch of servers. That's not Microsoft's responsibility to back up that server. That's your responsibility to back up that server. So whether you choose an embedded Microsoft solution to do storage backups, or you use a third-party vendor to grab that data and either replicate it, copy it to another site, maybe copy it to your local on-premise. You may have servers or a NAS storage box or whatever the case may be. But that again is your responsibility, and to ensure that you can recover from files and folders being deleted, obviously, and even virtual machines, completely going down, whatever the case may be. So this is sort of a visual picture of what I just said. You'll notice that when it's traditional on-prem servers and infrastructure, I mean, it's entirely up to us and you. That's our responsibility, right? It's your network, so you're responsible for it. But as you start to shift services and applications and infrastructure over, IaaS is infrastructure as a service, P is platform as a service, and the SaaS is pretty much an application as a service, right? If I would use an example, infrastructure as a service would be the ability to turn on virtual servers. You've moved them to the cloud. That's your infrastructure. Platform is a specific platform like SQL. So instead of turning on a server, installing SQL, and having your application run, Microsoft has the ability to run an SQL instance where you can just copy data. There's no servers there, but you are responsible for your data and all the programming and obviously the admin tasks that come with an SQL database, etc. And the SaaS could be individual applications, and that's when it becomes a bit more trickier because it's not only Microsoft that has SaaS applications; it's almost every vendor, and there's almost different types of applications that you can put in place. Financial, you can go with CRM, you can go with accounting software, you name it. Everything's a SaaS version right now. And it's important to ask the right questions with your current SaaS vendor, if you have one, or if you're looking to shift stuff over to a SaaS vendor, it's important to ask the right questions. And we were asked this in the previous webinar this morning in French, and so I'll go through these slides, and these are the types of questions that you should be asking your SaaS vendors. It falls in line pretty much with the strategies that you should be looking at, that you should be putting in place with any kind of SaaS or infrastructure as a service. So encryption, whether it's at rest and in transit, ensure that your vendor has some form of encryption of that data. Now, it's easy with Microsoft because they have the ability to encrypt your data at rest and in transit, and they actually offer it by default with some of their products. I just don't know whether or not it's active from the get-go, or if you have to go in and take a look and select the data at rest versus the data in transit, and which data is at rest and which data you want to encrypt. So that's something to look at. Or ask your managed service provider, obviously, to take a look at that. If you're worried about your data, it's extremely important to have that encryption in place in case someone gets in and tries to get in. Obviously, if the data is encrypted, it becomes much more difficult for them to have access to that data.
Shouldn't everybody be worried about their data, Sergio?
They should, yes, definitely.
You said if you're worried, I think we should all worry.
Yeah, I think so. So the good news is, most of us use Microsoft platform, and the Google Suite also has some form of encryption at rest and in transit. For those of you who have any kind of G Suite stuff, the workspace, I've seen it, so I know it's there. Okay, so let's move to the virtual firewalls. I mentioned it before, obviously. Let's go to the cloud, right? I'm going to move my servers over to the cloud, turn them back on. Everybody's happy, you have no more physical servers, but you just created a secondary site, and now you're connecting to it, and it's open in some shape, way, or form. You have to find a way to secure it in the same fashion as if you would traditionally have two offices in place and you were copying data back and forth, or you have users connecting to different systems at both sites. You have to do the same exercise. You have to implement a virtual firewall, whether it's with Microsoft, or you can add a third-party vendor. All security vendors have some form of virtual firewalls. Part number, pretty much, it's a virtual machine that runs and acts as a perimeter firewall to your cloud infrastructure, in the same way as a physical firewall would work is for anyone trying to connect to your local network. Same concept, right? VPN access, MFA, ensuring that there's a site-to-site connection and a secure pipe. All of that works for the virtual firewalls. In detail, access control, identity management, again, based on your traditional Active Directory functions, way back when, many decades ago, when that came in place. You know, have some form of a structure in place to identify your users, what groups they belong to, what data and apps these people have access to, the permissions, the access, what they can and can't do, role-based access, obviously. Ensure that you have a proper structure in place so it doesn't open up the door to hackers and pick any one of your employees because they all have administrative access. So that's not a good thing to do, which actually leads to the third point, the privileged access, right? I've seen customers where 20 employees and 15 of them have admin access, full admin access to their entire network. Do you really need that? And a lot of times it's, well, they really need it because they have, we have an application and it only works with admin. There's got to be a way to get that to work in another way. I've seen it in all of our cases. We've always found a way to reduce the number of admin level users in your environment. Strictly, find a way to get that admin user in a break glass situation where not many people need to use it, or you only need to use it at the bare when all else has failed, and then give specific accesses, privileged access to certain individuals that have equivalent to admin and that get the job done. And always have your users log in with their username. Never use an admin or sales at, or technician at generic email addresses. Not good for tracking, not good for auditing, etc. And before I move to that point, I skipped over the MFA, but ensure that anybody connecting to any application that is SaaS or cloud, ensure that there's some form of MFA in place. And most cloud vendors now have an MFA trigger in place and a mechanism to allow you to use either MFA standard MFA options, their own MFA with the authenticators, with Cisco Duo, you name it, with the products that are in place. A lot of these vendors now work with other vendors to allow you to integrate your existing MFA structure. And the previous points obviously lead to this. It's not good when you have generic email addresses logging in. It's not good when you have a bunch of people logging in and you have no idea who's logging in, when they're logging in, what their activities, what's going on, what are they accessing, are they downloading, are they printing, are they exporting? There's a lot of stuff you can put in place in terms of audit and monitoring to look at that activity. And then you also have the option to set up some alerts. So with Microsoft, you can set up some alerts by default. But if you want to get advanced features and start looking at things like, obviously you can block specific users from, if your users don't leave North America, well, you can contain the user access to your environment to North America. So if somebody's trying to access, you may have an employee going on vacation, brings their laptop, goes to Mexico, tries to connect because they forgot to do something. Well, you have to choose whether or not you're allowing them to do that. If you want them to do that, that's fine. Just make sure you have the right security solutions in place to monitor that, because it could very well be someone else connecting from Mexico. Or you can just, block it and then have policies in place that automatically refuse anybody connecting from outside countries, outside cities, etc. So that's there's third-party vendors that also you can go above and beyond what Microsoft offers to really go granular on the types of policies you can put in place and who does what and when they can connect. Example, I only want my users to log in from 6 in the morning to 10 at night, and then after 10 o'clock, I block all access. These are policies you can put in place to limit the amount of access or limit the amount of exposure that your environment has to potential bad actors. And then do some audit control on your cloud security settings. Obviously, vulnerability testing, pen testing, these are things you should do at least once a year to ensure that environment is as safe and secure as possible. We've done a lot of those. We've seen a lot of results. You may be surprised at what your typical M365 environment or Azure environment, once it's set up, how many vulnerabilities are found when you do a pen test and a vault test with a third-party vendor, with a third-party security company. They'll come in, run an audit, external, internal scan, give you the results, and give you some recommendations on how to close the gap and holes. Remember your backups. Don't assume that Microsoft or any other vendor is doing backups for you. I'll use an example for us. We use a CRM tool that is not Microsoft, so it's a third-party vendor. And they told us they do backups, right? But I don't have access to that backup because it's an infrastructure backup and an image, and their entire environment is captured and copied elsewhere and replicated. But if I were to delete 10 entries in my CRM, I have no way of getting that data if I've deleted it. So you work with the vendors to try and get a backup solution in place. They sometimes have something. Typically, what I see is you have the ability to grab your data and have it replicated or copy onto your local network on network storage or somewhere else in the cloud. Look for that, so you can, it's the likelihood of getting files and data, folders, client info deleted is you're more likely to get that than to have an entire CRM infrastructure go down on you. So it's always good to have that backup strategy in place. Test your backups. Make sure that you have proper restore process in place. So let's do the 3, 2, 1, 1, 0 concept. We used to say 3, 2, 1, and now we add the extra 1 and 0. So the 3 is 3 distinct copies of your data. The first one is usually your production data. So you're connecting to your applications or your servers. That's your production data, 1 copy. The other 2 have to be additional copies. And the 2 additional copies is the number 2, obviously, has to be copied on 2 different media. So it could be 2 different cloud platforms. It could be 1 cloud, and it could be maybe your own site where you're copying the data over to your NAS. But it needs to be on 2 separate types of NAS, not 2 storage units or storage devices in the same building or in the same cloud vendor, because obviously that's not 2, it's 1. And make sure that one of them is an offsite. So I mean, maybe a long time ago we didn't have that offsite. It wasn't as popular, and now because we're going to cloud, obviously theoretically you have your office, you have the cloud environment, the infrastructure is there. Make sure that one of those copies goes off-site of where your current production data is being hosted on. The second one is the off-site copy, which is actually
read
offline.
Yeah,
it could be
sorry.
offline. It says off-site, but it's offline, which means it's the equivalent of what Microsoft does on the back end to back up all their servers and infrastructure, and we don't see. That's Microsoft's version of an offline backup, because no one can get to it. So if, for example, you have an Azure infrastructure, there are options with Azure that you can activate an offline backup. It's part numbers with Microsoft, and you can set up your copy, and it does a snapshot, copy, etc. And you can't see that on the front end. So you don't see any server, you don't see the storage, you don't see any of that, but the backups are being done. Now, if you're not in the cloud or don't like that way of backing up an offline copy, I mean, you can just use third-party backup software, grab your data, copy it over, let's say, locally to a local NAS, but you then have to make sure that that NAS or storage device is completely disconnected from the network, turned off, not on the network, because the minute that device is on the network and there's someone in your network, the first thing they do is delete all your data and try and find a ways to encrypt it so that you can't have your plan B. So that's very important. And the last number is obviously the 0, which goes back to the testing of your data. We test our customers' data on a regular basis. Files, folders. We make sure that the data integrity is still okay, that we can restore files. It happens. You have users that delete files, you have admins that delete files, or just files disappear for whatever reason. You have to, feel comfortable in knowing that if anything gets deleted, you can actually restore because you know the data was good. And that's completely different from anything that is disaster recovery related. Like if you're looking to see if all your servers and all your data come back up in the event of a major disaster, you need to look at a disaster recovery process / test, which involves multiple people. Obviously, if you have people logging into applications, if you have a secondary site with Azure Site Recovery, you're replicating, don't automatically assume that if something happens to your main site, the other one will kick in without any problems. Not going to happen. You need to test out once a year to ensure that once your data is replicated and once one site goes down and the other one comes back up, can everyone connect to it? Can you see your data? Are all the key players able to connect to all the applications and run their business as usual? Or is there a problem? And if there's a problem, obviously that's part of a DR planning and DR exercise. You run your corrections, and then obviously you sleep better at night.
Well, environments aren't static, right? So they change over time. So that's why, like you suggested, it needs to be tested on a regular basis, like once
Yep.
a year, to make sure it still works, to make sure, you know, everything still is still accessible.
Yeah, change is the biggest factor in all DR test failures. A lot of time it's why didn't we back this server up? So, oh, we added it after the fact. We didn't think about it. Why isn't this application working? Oh, well, it's dependent on that thing and it's not working. We didn't consider it.
Yeah.
So you may be part of some kind of regulations, standards, compliancy, etc. Like I mentioned, if you're in accounting, law, etc., you have to hold your data for 5, 7, 15 years, whatever the case may be. And you may have that already done. But do you know if your SaaS vendor is doing the same thing, right? Are they storing that data for the same amount of time as you are? Because if they're not, then technically you're not compliant to on your side. So you have to ask that question to your vendors whenever you choose one, or if you have one already. And seventh point, I don't know if there's any other points on this. This is the last point. It's the employee training and awareness. You've moved to cloud. It's susceptible to a lot more activity by cyber criminals. The same thing applies as if you'd have a local network. Your users need that training because they are the weakest link all the time. So they'll click on an email, which will let in someone, and they'll take ownership of an account and then move their way upwards and into the cloud, and do whatever they feel like doing to your environment. So that's, again, weakest link is still with the employees. And put policies in place, obviously, to define, how are you going to use your applications. You may have a situation where you have a certain application where you only want your employees to use it when they're at the office and not remotely. That's fine. Just put a policy in place so that you have something that everybody understands, and train them, obviously, so that they know, this is how it works. And the same thing applies for sharing of data, collaboration. You may not feel comfortable sharing documents via OneDrive for enterprise, let's say. But if you're not comfortable with that, first of all, put policies in place to stop users from doing that. And that takes a bit of research and implementation before you get that done. But in the meantime, set up a policy, a document that, and then train your employees on, we don't want that type of data sharing happening on the OneDrive because of this, because of this factor. So that's fine. It's your data, right? So it's up to you to decide what your threshold of leniency that you want your employees to collaborate and share. But the biggest thing would be implementing of policies, so that you don't have to police them, and you don't have to be looking at logs, and you don't have to look at an enormous amount of data to figure out whether somebody shared something that they shouldn't have. Just let the policies do it, and just set up the alerts so that you know when something needs to be addressed. So as a recap, there's a clear line with the responsibilities between software cloud vendors, cloud providers versus your responsibilities. And then just go through these points. These are the questions you should be asking your SaaS vendors. Obviously, with Microsoft, we feel much more reassured. It's Microsoft, big machine. All of their policies are available online. You can go download everything that they have in place. But a lot of us deal with SaaS vendors that are not Microsoft. So ask them the questions. Ask them who's accessing their data, what type of building they have, do they have protection, the access control, do you have audits, the backups. All of that has to be asked, just to make sure that you're compliant on, that they're matching your level of your strategies that you're putting in place.
Excellent.
Talked a lot.
Nope, I think that was informative, so thank you, Sergio. I was going to mention again, if anybody has any questions, so please put them in the questions panel. We'll be happy to answer them. But in the meantime, as you see, we have our ebook that we're making available for this campaign. I'm just putting the link in the chat, so if you want to go download it, you can do that right now if you'd like. And I'm watching the questions panel, but I don't see any questions coming in. So with that, I guess I'm going to say thank you for joining us today. We encourage you again to download the ebook and reach out to your local microAge with any questions. This is our last microAge Talks Technology webinar of 2024. If you can believe it, we're already at the end of the year. Crazy. But we will be back in 2025. So keep an eye out on your emails or our social media channels for an invite to our next webinar. And with that, once again, thank you, Sergio. That was
Thank you.
enlightening as usual. So appreciate the presentation. And thanks to all of you for spending time with us today. And we wish everyone happy holidays and that we will see you again in 2025. So
Thank
take
you.
care, everyone, and thank you. Oh,
Have a great year.
sorry, there's a question. David, the presentation, I can email it to you. You can download it right from the webinar tool, but I'll send it to you. No problem, David. All right.
Goodbye,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.